Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPhone 15 Plus and compare it against the iPhone 14 Pro Max and see which specific iPhone is the better one for you. Now, clearly, I would probably say if you have all the money in the world, the 14 Pro Max might be the better one, but it's actually probably a cheaper iPhone now than the 15 Plus, which is pretty insane. So you would never think that, but with a device like the iPhone 15 Plus, although it is like $899 right now, it's like $900, with tax it's almost $1,000. With the 14 Pro Max, you could probably buy this thing for less than $900. It's probably closer to like $800 to be honest, now that this thing's been out for like over a year. So if you want to buy certain types of iPhones like this, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these iPhones, the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which came out in 2022, so just last year, has a 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR OLED display on the front. It's a very good display. I like this display a lot. It's a dynamic island, which is very similar to the 15 Pluses now, but this was a very good panel. I think it was probably the best panel Apple's ever made. Some big highlights, dynamic island, which is really great, but also you were getting that ProMotion display, which is a really nice display to have. Having ProMotion inside of your iPhone like this is really massive, and that kind of stuff is something that I actually love a lot. So with an iPhone like the 14 Pro Max, you were actually getting ProMotion, which is very nice. 120 Hz is amazing, and that kind of stuff just screams to me that that is probably the better phone when compared to like a 60 Hz display. With the iPhone 15 Plus, this phone is the brand new iPhone 15, 6.7-inch Super Retina XDR display on this one as well. I will say though, I think the 14 Pro Max's display is overall better. You're getting two main features with the display of the 14 Pro Max over the 15 Plus. For one, you were getting that ProMotion display that I talked about earlier. Very cool. I love having a ProMotion display, and this one is basically no exception. But also, you were getting an always-on display on the 14 Pro Max. The 15 Plus does not have like an always-on counterpart. It's, again, not the biggest deal in the world, but that is kind of a minor thing. So if you're somebody who wants to go ahead and have like an always-on display, you will have to go and buy something like the 14 Pro Max in order to actually get it. So not like the biggest deal in the world, but one of those things to kind of keep in mind at the end of the day. So in terms of the front, that kind of covers it up there. The sides of these phones are slightly different too. The 14 Pro Max had like this flat reflective side. The iPhone 15 Plus has this like curved side to it. Again, it's kind of preference. But on the bottom, the 15 Plus has a USB-C port where the 14 Pro Max had that Lightning port. So that is also a pretty big difference here. We are now finally getting USB-C. I'm sure everyone kind of knows that by now. So if you're somebody who actually preferred USB-C, well, that is one thing you're going to have to keep in mind. You're going to be able to get that type of capability on the iPhone 15 Plus over the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So once again, it's just one of those things you're going to have to keep in mind. Personally, for me, I prefer USB-C, but Lightning is still good. I'm sure Lightning is going to be fine for the next couple of years. But that is a pretty big difference right there. On the back, both of them have this frosted glass back, which feels very nice. The 14 Pro Max had that triple camera setup with that LiDAR sensor. The 15 Plus has that standard dual camera setup. Very good build quality on both. They have MagSafe capability, wireless charging, IP certification. Very good stuff, like a lot of similarity for sure. But it's kind of a flip-flop because the 14 Pro Max has the ProMotion display, always on display, and generally just feels better in the hand. But the iPhone 15 Plus has USB-C. And it still has the dynamic island, and it still feels very good with that frosted glass back. So there's a lot of similarity, some differences as well, but I'd probably say between both, the 14 Pro Max is probably the better one on the outside. I just wish it had USB-C. Now, moving on to the camera side of things. Like I mentioned before, both of them have a little bit of a different type of camera styling. So with the iPhone 15 Plus, you were getting that dual camera setup, a wide and ultra-wide camera, and they're very solid cameras. They're very good, lenses. Apple has given us the ability of basically getting 0.5x, 1x, and 2x zoom, giving us like 10x zoom basically on this device. With the iPhone 14 Pro Max, this device, triple camera setup, the wide, ultra-wide, and telephoto lens here as well. You're able to get, portrait mode, cinematic mode, all these types of modes on all these phones. It's basically the same exact thing, but you are getting 15x zoom on the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So that might be like another minor thing to keep in mind here. Again, it would not be the reason why I would go and like pick up something like an iPhone, 14 Pro Max over the 15 Plus, but you are definitely, as far as I know, you are getting a better camera setup on the iPhone 14 Pro Max than the 15 Plus. But there are some advancements that the 15 Plus has over the 14 Plus. So if you're comparing those two phones, the 15 Plus did get a little bit of an improved camera. But between these two, it's not really the biggest difference. Like I would say the 14 Pro Max is the better one because you are able to, still maintain the same type of, resolutions you can film in on both 4K at 60. The 14 Pro Max is kind of a cheaper phone now, so it's kind of one thing to keep in mind too. But I would probably say when it comes down to the camera setup on both, you are probably getting the better camera setup on the 14 Pro Max. But like I said, there might be some small little tweaks that Apple brought in for the 15 Plus. but even then it's not that big of a difference between both. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Now in terms of software and longevity, as far as I know, once again, that we can only assume because these things are going to be supported for years and years and years now, both of these devices have the same exact chipset inside. So because of that, I have a hard time believing that Apple would go ahead and make the 15 Plus last longer than the 14 Pro Max. So because of that, I feel like Apple's going to start supporting the Pro phones of last year the same amount of time as the base phones and the Plus phones of the year after. So what I mean by that is basically the iPhone, 14 Pro will last as long as the iPhone 15. The iPhone 15 Pro will last as long as the iPhone 16. The 16 Pro will last as long as the 17, so on and so forth, because those will end up using the same types of chipsets. So I think that's what Apple's probably endgame is for this. So I think that's what's going to end up happening. So every year they would pretty much drop 2 sets of phones at the same time, the Pro models of last year and the base models of the year after. And this is probably one case of what's going to happen. The Pro Max and the Plus, are probably going to end up around the same time. So that's my assumption. I could be totally wrong, but from what Apple's done before, they've done this kind of stuff before as well. I think that's what's probably going to end up happening here. Now, in terms of the overall performance of both these phones, the iPhone 15 Plus, like I said, has that Apple A16 Bionic chip inside of it, with the iPhone 14 Pro Max has that Apple A16 Bionic chip inside of it as well. They have pretty much the same amount of RAM in both these models as well. So once again, you're basically getting the same exact performance on both these devices. And I personally do feel like with these devices, you are getting very good phones, right? I like these phones a lot, and I feel like whatever Apple's done, they've done a great job here. And if you're getting the 14 Pro Max, some advantages for this type of phone. One, you are basically getting that promotion display. So even when you're playing a game or something like that, some games may, actually have 120 Hz options. And that definitely makes the phone feel so much faster and just feels like it performs that much better. With the iPhone 15 Plus, one advantage you have here is that you are getting USB-C. So if you want to use some USB-C accessories, if you want a USB-C fan to cool your phone down, things like that, you have that type of capability if you're doing heavy performance loads. But beyond that, you're basically getting the same type of performance on both too. So it's not even that big of a difference, but it kind of is a minor one. So that is kind of how I see both these phones from that perspective as well. Battery life wise, funny enough, Apple does actually state that you're getting better battery life from the 14 Pro Max than the 15 Plus. I don't know how that happens, but I guess that's the case. You would imagine with 120 Hz that would mess things up, but I'm assuming they're not even accounting for that. So on paper, you could be getting better battery life from the 14 Pro Max. I would probably assume that you're getting similar type of battery life, but if you want the better battery life, the 14 Pro Max is probably the one that you probably want to go down, if you want to get the better battery life. So that kind of covers it up here. To be honest, I think I would rather have the 14 Pro Max over the iPhone 15 Plus. Although with the 15 Plus, you're getting a newer phone with USB-C and Dynamic Island and so many other things. I think the 14 Pro Max of last year is probably the one I would probably recommend more people to buy. I feel like this phone, you are getting just the better camera setup, better display, always on display. You're getting still lightning port, but it's still fine. And everything else is basically the same between both. But because it's in the used market and probably cheaper, I'd probably just buy a 14 Pro Max over the iPhone 15 Plus in my opinion. So that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.